Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on the time you get to watch me. Welcome to another video on philosophy, challenging ideas that I think everyone should know. And today, I want us to go in the area of philosophy of science. I want us to discuss some concepts that have been borrowed from science into popular culture, and their use over time sometimes become misleading in the way we understand reality or in the way we have conversation. So you've heard about maybe someone saying something like evolution is just a theory, or someone say that's only a hypothesis. Usually what they mean is that it's uncertain, it's weak, or probably false. But in the area of science, those words do not mean what most people think they mean. And since these words came from science, when we use them, they usually come with the seriousness of science, even though we're not using them in the way they are used in science. One of the strangest things human beings do is to borrow technical language from specialized fields and slowly bring them into popular culture or popular conversation and slowly dilute those words' meaning through everyday conversations. So, over time, you find theory becomes an opinion, hypothesis becomes a guess, research becomes scrolling online, evidence becomes something that someone agrees with. And eventually, people stop understanding how knowledge itself works because language really affects how we reason about knowledge. So, since these words that I want us to discuss have been borrowed largely from science, words like facts, evidence, hypothesis, theory, and law have been borrowed from the field of science. I want us to look at these words from philosophy of science. Philosophy of science, or science in itself, is not just about laboratories and equation. It's about understanding what counts as knowledge, what counts as an explanation, and what counts as proof, and how human beings reason about these things as they relate to reality. So let us clean up these 5 concepts that people constantly use in popular conversation and in most cases misuse. We want to look at facts, we want to look at evidence, we want to look at hypotheses, we want to look at theories and laws. First, fact. A fact is an observation about reality. For instance, an observation that water always boils at around 100 degrees Celsius at the sea level. That's a fact. A fact that the earth always orbits around the sun. That's a fact. These are facts because they are repeatedly observed and verified. So something that cannot be repeatedly observed and verified is not a fact. A fact answers to one question: what appears to be happening? Can it be observed? Can it be verified? So next time you say that's a fact, you need to ask yourself, is it something that can be observed? Can it be verified? And that brings us to an area of philosophy called metaphysics, which gives us something deeper about facts. Facts assume that there is a reality that is independent of the person who is talking about the fact. It's independent of what our opinions are. So, when you're talking about facts, you're speaking about the ultimate reality, which is the study of metaphysics. Metaphysics asks, what kind of world exists such that that fact can even be possible? Let's get into the area, or let's talk about now evidence. Evidence is information used to support or to challenge a claim. For instance, in case of crime, fingerprints can be used as evidence. A medical scan can be used as evidence in hospital. When you see clouds in the sky, that can be used as evidence for a storm is approaching. But evidence does not interpret itself. It's interpreted using, or it's interpreted from human reasoning. And that interpretation then takes us to epistemology. Epistemology asks, how do we know what we know? What separates just a belief from a justified belief? What separates what someone believes is true from something that's justified, or we have a rationale for its belief? It also asks, when does evidence become sufficient for knowledge? In ordinary life, people often confuse having confidence in something with that thing being evidence. Just because you have confidence in something does not mean that that thing is evidence. The two, your confidence and evidence, are not the same thing. The next word that we use is hypothesis. In normal conversation, people use hypothesis to mean a random guess, but scientifically, a hypothesis is something much more disciplined, much more deeper. It is a proposed explanation that can be tested. In the same manner, a fact is observed and verified. A hypothesis has to be something that can be observed and can be tested. So next time you say, I have a hypothesis, you should be ready that we can actually we can ask you, how would you observe your hypothesis and how can it be tested? For example, if we say that this medicine can reduce headache, that's a hypothesis which can be tested by someone taking that pill or drinking that medicine, and then we test it. And most importantly, a real hypothesis has to be a statement that can be proved at some point to be wrong, or it has a risk of being not correct. Any hypothesis that cannot be determined to be true or false, or it's always true, is not useful in science or telling us anything about knowledge. If there is a possible way to test it or prove it to be false, then that's useful in science. But if there is no possible way to test a hypothesis or prove it to be false, science cannot do much with it. And so, that hypothesis is not relevant or is not useful in knowledge. This connects us directly to logic. Logic studies how conclusions follows from premises. And the premises are usually made up of either facts or evidence. So whether a claim contradicts the evidence or the facts, that's an area of logic assessment. So a hypothesis without a logical structure becomes just a speculation that's not useful in understanding reality, it's not useful in knowledge, and it's not useful generally to tell us anything about reality. And now we reach the most misunderstood word of all, theory. A scientific theory is not a weak idea waiting to be true. It is a powerful explanation framework supported by extensive evidence. It is an explanation where we already have a huge body of knowledge, and therefore it's useful to help us understand reality, why it is the way it is and not any other way. For example, the theory of evolution, the theory of germ theory, or germ theory on disease, and the theory of relativity. These are not just guesses. These are positions of explanation about reality where we have a large body of knowledge, evidence, and facts that makes it useful in explaining why something is the way it is and not any other way. These are among the strongest explanatory systems human beings have ever produced. And here is where many people become confused. Theories do not graduate to become laws. Theories explain. Laws, on the other hand, describe patterns. For example, Newton's law describes how objects behave under gravity. But a theory of relativity helps us to explain why gravity behaves the way it does. One describes patterns, the other explains mechanism. Now, these 5 concepts, facts, evidence, law, theory, have been borrowed into popular culture. And over time, these scientific words have escaped science. Now it's in popular conversation. And in popular conversation, a theory becomes an opinion. And we can even borrow more words from science. Word like trauma becomes just something that you are uncomfortable with, or that gives you discomfort becomes trauma. And you can see how in our time, everything is almost diagnosed as trauma. Then toxic becomes someone who annoys you. And you can see how we always try to ascribe the word toxic to things or to human beings that we don't like. The word energy becomes mood. And slowly, the precision of this word in how they are used in science collapses. Now, why does this matter? This matters because language shapes how we reason, and reasoning shapes how we make decisions, both for individual and for public. So when we start labeling everything toxic, trauma, you can see how the lack of precision, how it can lead to individual conflicts between you and other people, and how that can also cause chaos in public discourse. And this now brings us into the territory of philosophy called ethics. If people cannot distinguish evidence from opinion or theory from speculation, public decisions becomes difficult. It actually deteriorates. Bad reasoning eventually becomes social consequence. And that's why it's really important that when we are using words, we use them precisely how they were invented or created to be used. Any shift from that has to have a clear explanation, and we have to be clear on what's the definition. This is why philosophy of science matters far beyond science itself, especially that its words have been borrowed into popular culture. Philosophy of science, it disciplines the human mind. It teaches us to ask, what exactly is being claimed? What evidence supports it? Is the reasoning valid? What assumptions are hidden underneath the use of these words? When words lose precision, thinking loses precision. And when thinking loses precision, societies become easier to manipulate. Civilization depends not only on intelligence, but also on disciplined, optimized reasoning. Therefore, to understand facts, evidence, hypotheses, theories, and laws is not merely to understand science or philosophy of science. It is to understand how human beings search for knowledge and truth. And ultimately, our main goal in trying to understand reality is to pursue knowledge and truth as it is, not as we wish it was. That's the end of the video. I hope you've enjoyed another video of philosophical challenging ideas that I think everyone should know. Thank you for watching, and let's continue engaging.